Bonsoir, je m'appelle Hessouh et aujourd'hui je voudrais vous parler à propos de l'importance de votre langue maternelle. Good evening, my name is Hessouh and tonight I'd like to talk to you about the importance of your mother tongue. I'd like to start off with something Nelson Mandela once said. He said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. This is a quote I believe is meant for all of us and relates to what I'm going to talk to you about today. Now, how many of you have English as a second language? Okay. Now, how many of you use English more than you do your first language? I'm not gonna lie, I do too. I'd like to tell you guys all a story. Back when I used to live in Canada, in Quebec, I used to see my cousin all the time. He came over all the time, and we spoke French because that was our native language. He was learning English at the time, but I wasn't, so I didn't know a word of English. A couple years went by, we didn't see each other, and that's when I moved to Ghana, in Africa. And that's when I had to learn how to speak English. I remember that year, I went back to Canada during the summer, and he came over for a visit once. The most shocking thing happened when he came over. He could barely speak French anymore. I mean, I didn't know how that was possible. I mean, do you guys ever think you could forget your first language? No, because it's not really something we ever concern ourselves about or ever think is going to happen to us. Until it does. I remember that day I made a promise to myself. I would never forget my first language. French, it was stuck in here and it wasn't about to come out. The sad truth about this whole thing is, I wasn't really able to keep up with that promise. I mean, yeah, I still speak French just fine, but come on. My writing skills are rusty and sometimes I have troubles remembering the simplest of words. And that's really not how it's supposed to be. Now, a lot of you guys might ask, how does this relate to us? Why is this relevant? Why is this important? Well, let's take a look at international students. Let's take a look at us. Most of us have been to many different schools on different continents. We've picked up on different cultures, different languages. That's great, that's wonderful, but what about your culture? Or what about your language? Are they not just as important? Many international students probably plan to return home at some point in their lives to continue their education. And that's one of the main reasons right there you need to make sure there are no gaps in your first language. Research have shown that students who have English as a second language and tend to neglect their first language often end up suffering from identity loss and alienations from your parents, your grandparents, and your family back in your home country. I mean, not many of us think about it much, but losing your first language is more than just losing your language. You're losing your connections that you have to your family members. And I don't know about you guys, but disappointing my grandmother is about the last thing I want to do. Research have shown just how much more you can learn if you were to retain your first language. According to the Intercultural Development Research Association, students who have English as a second language and keep nurturing and furthering the advances of their first language often end up having a higher academic achievements than students who study English at the expense of their first language. So you guys might ask, what can you do? What are the things that you guys can do to maintain your first language? Well, I'll tell you 5 things. 5 things to help you. Number 1, watching television. As simple as watching television, preferably the news, in your first language can help you to stay in touch with your language and stay in touch with whatever's happening back in your home country. Number 2, that's probably something that most of us young people don't do much anymore, but listening to the radio can actually help. And by the way, to clarify, Mr. Duffy, I am not calling you old. Number 3, reading. So many people do not understand the power of reading. Whether it's literature or newspapers, as long as it is in your first language, I guarantee you that it will help you to maintain your first language, but not only that, it will further it and nurture it even more. Number 4, home language. Just speak it at home. That might not mean much to you, but I remember the time when I used to speak French at home all the time. Now it's a mix of French and English, sometimes even in the same sentence, because I can't remember the rest of the words in French. Last but not least, visit. Just go home once in a while. Go see your family, get back in touch with your culture, with your language, and remember that that's the place where you came from. And in many ways, it is who you are. And of course, there's no place like home. Thank you.